Labas rytas visiems. Tikrai džiaugiamės matydami jūsų gausią auditoriją. Šiandien dieną nusprendėme struktūruoti taip, jog turėtumėm mažiau pranešimų, bet iš tikrųjų daugiau laiko kokybiškai išnagrinėti kiekvieną temą, kuriai pristatyti pakvietėme iš tikrųjų puikius savo sričių ekspertų žinovus. Tai naudokitės progą užduoti jiems klausimus tiek po kiekvieno pranešimo, tiek galbūt ir pertraukų metu. Šis renginys yra skirtas jums. Taip pat noriu pradėti pasakydama, kad mūsų pirmasis pranešėjas, pateiksiantis apžvalgą globalių tendencijų, tarptautiškumo ir kokybės sąsajų, yra Stendeno taikomųjų mokslų universiteto lektorius ir dėstytojas. Jis taip pat dalyvavo kuriant tarptautinių studijų centrą ir doktorantūros programą. Daugiau kaip 30 darbo metų praleido dirbdamas įvairiuose Australijos universitetuose, 5 iš jų. Taip pat jis domisi tarptautiškumo tematika daugiau kaip 20 metų, turi iš tikrųjų sukaupęs didžiulę patirtį, yra tarptautinės švietimo asociacijos narys, taip pat redaktorių tarybos narys žurnalo Journal of Studies in Internationalisation, recenzentas įvairių mokslinių straipsnių. Jis buvo vienas iš įkūrėjų Euroscholars, tai yra asociacija 12 pirmaujančių Europos universitetų, kurie įsipareigoja gerinti pirmojo ciklo studijų kokybę ir siūlyti geresnės galimybės užsienio studentams. Leidono universitete jis buvo vadovas Global Ranking Symposium Series ir yra nuolatinis kalbėtojas įvairiose konferencijose. Šiandien mums iš tikrųjų yra garbė pristatyti Robertą Koeleną pirmam pranešimui.
Yes, it's on.
I know, but I don't like standing behind a lectern. I like to be a little bit more mobile, and we've got some technology here to follow me, so that suits me right down to the ground. I want to preface my whole presentation with just a few remarks. I've had the good fortune of being here in this country a few times now, and last night I spent some time with good colleagues from VGTU to talk about internationalization, and it sharpened my mind on the issues that you face as a country. And part of my history is very relevant for you, because when I joined the international education or internationalization effort at James Cook University, Australia was in a status where I now think you are. So I'm starting to see some interesting parallels. The introduction I just listened to, in fact, confirmed some of this. Part of your internationalization efforts is about recruiting students. I can honestly say that when I started internationalization efforts at James Cook University, and I'm talking about 1997, and JCU was a Johnny-come-lately, we were in the same mode, because we had a university with a $50 million hole in a $150 million budget, and I don't have to tell you what sort of problems that leads to. And so we were, as a university, looking at recruiting international students to fill a gap, a financial gap, more than anything else, and it drove how we behaved as universities. I've moved from JCU to the University of Queensland, where I was responsible for 1/7 of the total university budget. We recruited some 2,500 new international students every year, part of a cohort being responsible for about 100 million Australian dollars per year in revenue. I then moved to Leiden University, and I came in a totally different world. My last cri de coeur in Australia was, we can't just recruit students from all these countries. I could just about embroider my name on a Singapore Airlines flight to Singapore because the University of Queensland alone recruited 1,000 Singaporeans every year to come and study with us. And we did nothing with universities in Singapore. And so my cri de coeur was what I call the academic approach. We have to engage with these source countries more than just getting their brightest students to come and study with us. That's a great ideal. The other myth I want to sort of share with you is that we talk so much to ourselves into believing that this was internationalization. And by bringing in all these international students on campus, also our local students would become internationalized. Now, I sat down in 2004 with Bengt Nielsen, the father of internationalization at home, and we concluded that after so many years of Erasmus student mobility and 20% of international students in Australia amongst our local students, that the international students had a fantastic international network, but it excluded the local students. So as universities, we actually failed to make true that internationalization, bringing international students amongst our local students, would somehow give them an international learning environment. And in fact, the didactic pedagogy does anything but. Just imagine if you were in a room here and next to you sits someone from another country, but all you're doing is listening to me. What's the value of the person next to you? So you need pedagogies where students work with one another and are codependent to make that even work. But we didn't know that. We were focused on getting in more students because our government continually, from the time I went to Australia as a young whippersnipper in 1974 to when I left the country, there's only ever been a decline in funding of higher education. When I joined Australia, it was in the order of 90% of the funds of universities came down from heaven, and when I left, it was 40%. And universities started to behave more like corporations. So you can imagine the culture shock I had when I joined Leiden University as its Vice President International to sort of start doing internationalization for Leiden. They actually wanted some of the Australian experience. They were shortchanging themselves. They were asking very little. Some deans would, as a matter of principle, say, I only charge international students what we charge our local students. At the time it was 1,500 euros. And I said, but what do we get from the government in addition to the 1,500 euros for the local students to make you be able to deliver it? You're not even recovering costs. In fact, you are subsidizing every international student. So in Leiden, the story was a bit different. Good. Let me get into my talk and tell you that at the most basic level, internationalization is a response to globalization. I use Albro and King in terms of globalization and say it's, you know, things coming across your border, ideas, people, goods, that sort of thing. And how do you as society deal with that? And at the higher education level, you can say the same. All of a sudden, you've become exposed, let me put it this way, through global ranking to globalization at its worst. You're exposed because all of a sudden your society, voiced by the politicians, say you must get ranked, you must get world rank, and the pressure sort of comes on to you. Jane Knight, and bless her soul, came out with a definition for internationalization of higher education that was somewhat non-committal. You had to add an international and intercultural dimension to education and research and your third function, and bingo, you're internationalizing. That meant that people thought that if we teach things in English, we're internationalizing. Now, that's not quite true. That's a slightly complicated story, but I'll get to that. Before getting a bit further with internationalization, I want to point out some of the blatantly obvious to you. We're in a continuous state of flux. And the one bit of flux I think we all suffer from is increased accountability. I'm not saying necessarily that's bad, but the pendulum always swings a bit too hard, and the level of accountability causing us to become distracted from what we really want to do sometimes gets in the way of being a good university. A word of caution. The data I have are not all from 2014 or 2015. Some data I have, I had to go back a bit further in time, and I'm hoping that can be updated, but there it is. We're in a state of flux not only in universities, but there are some major global changes. Urbanization. In the last 30 years, we've gained some 2 billion urbanites around the globe. Think about it. 50% of GDP, global GDP growth, is going to come out of 440 emerging cities. Not the places of law that we all recognize, but new places that heretofore were not in that part of the global GDP growth. This country, like 60% of all countries, is not replacing its citizens. You are below the replacement rate in terms of population. 30 years ago, only a few % of countries were in that ball game. And global connections is quite different. When I went for the first time to China, there was one airport you could go to. It was in Beijing. We called it Peking at the time. That was the only place you could go in. Have a look now. The Netherlands, the only place to leave was through Amsterdam. And a tiny pipsqueak country with 17 million inhabitants now has 4 places from which you can launch yourself internationally. What does that mean? When I was at James Cook University, I had when I started, a few Korean students. The very minute Asiana Airlines started to fly from Seoul to Cairns, I got an increase in my Korean student numbers without lifting a finger. So new air bridges create new business at all levels. And so these 440 emerging cities are the ones that get into these new air bridges as part of the story. The other bit I don't have to tell you, knowledge doubling. Until the year 1900, it took 100 years for mankind's knowledge to double. In the last century, it went to 25 years for knowledge doubling. Currently, this slide is old, I'm sorry, it's 2 years old. Currently we're at 12 months, and the pundits who study this say we'll get to 12 hours. That's an insane sort of number and an insane concept to get your head around. An oncologist today needs to spend 168 hours per week to read everything that's relevant to his or her discipline. So we're going to create a new job. We're going to create a job for oncologists who don't treat patients, but who look at all the new knowledge and translate it into sensible information that is useful to oncologists. Technological change. I can remember about 8 years ago, a colleague at Groningen University saying to the head of marketing, we must do something with this Facebook thingy. Nah, it's a fad, it'll go away. Okay, I wish I had shares in Facebook. They took a bit of a beating, 8% last night, but they've tripled in value since being launched. I'm going to show you the distribution of global middle classes. I want to ram home the enormous change that's happening right now. And I'm going to mark off the position in 2009 for Europe, with some 36% of the global middle class, Asia Pacific with 28%, and North America with 18%. And then we're going to slide the time. These are not my predictions, they're World Bank predictions. And let's have a look what happens. By 2030, 66% of the global middle class will be living in Asia Pacific. So who is going to be serving who? Where is going to be the economic point of gravity? If I didn't make the point clear enough, building planes is sort of a game of predicting a long time in advance where you're going to sell these damn things. You know, the lead time is pretty substantial. So Boeing makes these predictions about where are people going to fly, who's flying around the globe. So what you've got here is a lot of dots. You really only want to worry about North America, Europe and China, and just watch, oh sorry, that's China, even further back. Just watch what happens of flights within these regions over the next 15 years or so. And part of this is history. You'll see the history, the global recession. Zzzt, everything went back for a moment. But look at what Boeing thinks where they'll be selling planes because people are flying around. And if that doesn't make it obvious, let's take then the location of global Fortune 500 companies around the world. We have up here the developed regions with a lion's share. This is the share in global GDP on this axis, and this is the share of Fortune 500 within regions. Until 2000 it stayed the same. And look what's happened since that time and what's being predicted to happen until 2025. A complete change. Who's ever heard of Haier? Yeah, nobody. It's the world's 4th largest white goods producer in China. No one had ever heard of it. You've all heard of Alibaba. You will soon be using Alibaba, I can assure you. They're going places. Now, I was asked to talk about higher education quality, ethics, and internationalization, global and European trends. What will come through my talk is where I think the emphasis lies, but don't take my word for it. Let me just translate this, which is a mix of the impressions I've gained over the last couple of days and studying your country in the higher education system and listening to colleagues. My translation is this for you. What is the position of my university and how can I improve this position with a number of conditions? I don't want to abrogate the quality of what we do. I want to maintain healthy enrollment numbers. Who wants to shrink? Nobody does. But realize that's in the presence of strongly developing actors all over the globe. You are here in Lithuania talking about improving your fortunes. This is happening all over the place around you. You're not alone. Virtually every self-respecting country in the world has said we must have world-class universities. I'm going to show you something about ranking, why I think this is doomed to fail. What national assistance do you have to create a Lithuanian education brand? You need it. And I'm going to, maybe it's heresy, but I'm going to suggest something else later on. I asked 127 experts on internationalization around the world. Take my word for it, they're experts. 50% in Europe, about 50% elsewhere. 32% only looks at internationalization, 68% has a portfolio that includes more, and the average time they spent on internationalization was 17 years. They're experts. I did a stupid thing, made a survey, 3 rounds, as you do in a Delphi study, to get some sensible answers. But the stupid thing was I had too many open-ended questions, so I ended up analyzing about half a book of what they actually said. But it was interesting. I asked them, what's the meaning of internationalization of higher education to you? And the majority talked about globalization response, partnerships, intercultural development, mobility, internationalization of the curriculum, recruitment, recruiting international students. It's not sitting there. Internationalization at home, foreign languages and learning outcomes. Why? Why are you doing this? I want to create the global citizen. The overwhelming answer. Now, we can have a long debate about what that means, but it's about the content of your programs. Enhancing quality, employability, enhanced relevance for economic reasons, for political reasons, get the politicians off your back, or because I have previous experience with it. Are we going to have more or less internationalization of higher education? Overwhelmingly, there will be more. Why more? Well, right at the top. Competition. Academic competition, financial competition, you name it. Economic considerations, a second. Response to globalization. Let me translate this. Let me just divide it in academic content and competition. It's almost a 50-50 show. We're doing it for the content of our programs. We're doing it for competitive reasons. With Hans de Wit and Fiona Hunter, I played around with Jane Knight's definition to give it a bit more focus. And we said, hey, it's an intentional process. It doesn't happen by itself. You need to invest in it. Why is it? In order to enhance the quality of education and research for all students and staff, and to make a meaningful contribution to society. That's what we all want as higher education institutions. I can't imagine anyone being desperately against this. We put this in a report to the European Parliament. They asked, can you tell us about internationalisation? And so this is what they got. Research, and I've done quite a bit of research and a lot of it in international collaboration. Research and internationalisation, I'm going to park that for the moment. Yes, I know it's important. Co-publication with international partners leads to, depending on the discipline, between 2 and 7 times more chance of it being published. So international collaboration in research is good, but I'm going to park that for a moment because I'm focused on the young people who we're entrusted to put in this globe, in this fast changing globe. And so internationalization of higher education for me, in terms of the teaching and learning process, is to create an environment containing such elements that the learner is given the opportunity to actually achieve learning outcomes. And I'm very deliberate in using learning outcomes, and I'll get to that why. Associated with international awareness and intercultural competence. All of a sudden, I've reduced internationalization to 2 skills: intercultural competence and international awareness, or skills, values, attitudes, and a bit of knowledge, if you like. I've reduced it. Well, as a scientist, I was always taught, when you have a problem, try and reduce it to more simple sort of elements so that you can understand what's going on. Well, if we're going to give people an idea why they want to internationalize, why they want to have an education that's internationalized, tell them about some learning outcomes of international awareness and intercultural competence. Let me get on to why I think these are 2 essential elements, but not before. My definition of quality of education is principally, of course, a fitness for purpose, creating graduates who, and you can fill in the list as you like, critical thinkers, good communicators, problem solvers, analysts, oh yeah, knowledgeable in their field, and lifelong learners, capable of interacting effectively across cultures, underwrite sustainability as a core value, and a strong sense of social responsibility. You want your graduates to be able to live in the future, and you want them to have work. The notion that you study what happens to be your fancy, there's very few people who can afford that. Most young people study at universities in order to get employed, and in order to get employed at a level where they feel they're making a meaningful contribution to their and the life of others. So how does internationalization add to the quality of education? Let me start then with the employers. This is a US survey. It's being done about annually. And the interesting thing about the employer's opinion is that 60% think graduates should have both field-specific and a broad range of knowledge. Another 25% say, well, look, I don't care about the field-specific as much as I do about the broad knowledge. And then there's a small proportion, 15%, who say, well, you know, I want people who understand the business of what we're into, the cognitive side of things. The broad skills, they sort of dug a bit deeper. What are you talking about? Well, we're talking about, from the bottom upwards, educational experiences solve problems with people whose views are different from their own. Got the highest rating. they need to be able to work in teams, not necessarily with everybody out of the same mold, going up to intercultural skills and understanding other cultures. This is what students thought of that. They are in reasonable agreement. But these broad skills, we've always called them the soft skills. I've worked with the Dutch national team on reconfiguring the International Business and Management Studies programs. We have a national sort of competency profile for these things. And I persuaded this team to leave the 15 or 16 worldly, motherly statements of competences that graduates were going to have, to swap them for 41 learning outcomes that give very specific ideas about what it is these graduates are capable of at the end of their program. And the funny thing was, when we tested this with employers, and I won't go into the method, it's a bit involved, but what came out was that the transversal skills, these broad skills, were across the board important. And depending on the sector you were in, it was nice to have a bit of sectoral knowledge as well. But it was almost a flip. We'd always worried about the contents of the program, and now it was about the transversal skills. And use content as a way to bring about these transversal skills, but make sure you test for the transversal skills. I was in the US with that. This is the UK, same story. Yes, we want you to have technical and discipline competence, but, and this is the EDGE Foundation, also a broader range of skills. It's emphasized. Let's, and these data are unfortunately 2010. I can't find any newer ones Europe-wide. Recruitment of higher education graduates. Here's Lithuania. Have recruited, plan to recruit more, the dark bar. Have recruited, but not planning to recruit more, and didn't plan or haven't recruited. And Lithuania 6 years ago was here. I'm not sure where you are today. What should you look at when you recruit higher education graduates? This is the European picture. At the top, team working skills, followed by sector-specific skills, followed by communication, computer, ability to adapt and to act in new situations. It goes down, it goes down. Foreign language skills was, and it depends very much on the country. The UK scores almost zip there, because with English we can do a lot, and Luxembourg was very high. What should graduates have in the next 5 to 10 years? Well, sector-specific skills wanted out just on a whole range of what I call these soft skills. But they're there massively, and they're there across whatever work you might go and do. Have the graduates you've recruited in the last 3 to 5 years, have they got the skills required to work in your company? Okay. You're at the end here, but again, I don't know how many of you are familiar with this particular Eurobarometer and whether Lithuania has acted on this. I hope you have, and then I'd love to see the more recent figures to see how you've shifted along this. I can't imagine you've stood still on this. The greatest challenge employers had was finding applicants with the right skills in country. What does that mean for the workplace? I'll tell you what it means for the workplace. Europe-wide, it means that a quarter to 20% of the recruits came outside of Europe or another country in Europe. So your graduates are going into a company, and there's every chance that the teams they'll work in are with foreigners. That requires then a whole set of skills to bridge this cultural gap. Can you just imagine a Lithuanian engineer working with a Bulgarian, hoisting a wind turbine between two buildings? I've got there's a little National Geographic movie of this, and it's not Lithuanians and Bulgarians, they were from all nations. But when a Bulgarian says, no, it's not safe to hoist it now, he goes like this. There's a very simple example, but of course disasters happen when you don't understand one another very well. Well, employers have sort of said what should you do in terms of employability, and work integrated learning sort of looms big on the horizon. Give your students that chance. Frey and Osborne, not so long ago, two chaps at Oxford, have looked at 702 jobs, divided all these jobs in tasks, and said, what of these tasks can we computerize? If I pluck out of their paper a couple of examples, sales and sales-related jobs, they'll disappear. And when people don't quite believe this, I ask by show of hands, and I'm asking you now, how many of you have bought something via the internet? Yes, a lot of hands go up. You've just knocked a whole bunch of people out of the chain of getting the goods to you, so jobs disappear. This is a famous graph. It shows which areas jobs disappear, a high probability of going away and a high probability of staying. By the way, we're here, guys. Education is on the side of it's not going to go away. So in that sense, your job is safe. But if you were an accountant, you have a 99% chance of your job disappearing by 2025. Computerization bottlenecks. I've already starred some things. Philips took its production of the shavers out of China because of quality problems and costs. They put it in the Netherlands with very high wages, but they set a row of 130 robots to put together these electric shavers. So in the Frey and Osborne paper they say precisely coordinated movements of fingers and grasp and manipulate, forget it, we can do that. And that, I just read in a brochure of GVTU, let me get this right, GVTU, I read about some students who developed some manipulation based on optics that can sort of work very finely. That's no longer a bottleneck. Moving into awkward positions, yes. The plumber who needs to crawl into your kitchen cupboard is still going to have a job because you can't stick a robot in there, not for the moment. Creative intelligence and social intelligence are the sort of job terrain that is at the moment hard to computerize. So those jobs will stick around, where knowledge of human heuristics, specialist occupation, developing novel ideas and artifacts. Having a degree basically means a bigger chance of retaining your job, say for some of the others. So let me get back to internationalization and quality then. What's the link? Well, we know from some early research that internationalization enhances these transversal skills. This is important. So when you send students away, when you make them mobile, they come back and they're better problem solvers, they're analytically they're better, they're socially better, they have a whole range of skills that have increased. Why is this so? We need to know why this is. Why? Because not all students are mobile, but I'd like all my graduates. So go back to the definition that we changed. We said internationalization must apply to all students. But does that mean you do international things? No, not necessarily so. Let me give you a simple example. And Leeds Beckett University has been trialing this. Why does someone have this life-changing experience when they go to a foreign country? I think part of this has to do with the so-called disorienting dilemmas they face when going abroad. You wake up, you open your eyes, that's not your ceiling. Your head is on a pillow, that's not your pillow. At breakfast, I can't find my favorite Wheaties. I go to an institution, I don't know what they expect of me, how they... Stress, 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 stress. Overcoming these stresses makes you tolerant for ambiguity. It's one of these skills that people should have. Make you make decisions better because you're a different person. So you get for free all of these transversal skills when you go abroad. But I want to make sure that my students at home do that. Leeds Beckett said, well, okay, we get our students to work with drug addicts, refugees. We put them in contact with people at the margins of our society and make them do useful things. And they'll feel very uncomfortable. And they overwin this discomfort and they change. They've measured these things and they change on a range of these transversal skills. Well, there's nothing international about that, but it certainly evokes the same learning outcomes as if you were to go international. So we need to understand more of this. The Erasmus Impact Study looked at this with a test. Owen Brandenburg and his crew created this. And the improvements they saw in employability-related aspects were factors of leadership, confidence, vigor, decisiveness, tolerance of ambiguity, self-awareness and curiosity. All took a flight with mobility. The good people in Finland at CIMO looked at this and said, well, this is what we know, what you get when you become internationally mobile: cultural knowledge, language skills, tolerance. But what they found was that elements related to productivity, resilience and curiosity also took an enormous leap. So I've just tried to make clear to you that employers ask for these skills, and lo and behold, when you send students international, they gain in these skills. Employers don't know this yet, because when employers in Finland were asked, would you take someone or do you consider their international experience when you employ them, and they say no. It's really strange. So we need to get a message out to employers, what happens to students. And I think this message, and we've done this now with the IBMS program in the Netherlands, is through these learning outcomes, and explain the value of these learning outcomes also to employers. Let's get on to ranking, because you are besieged with pressure to rank. I don't care which ranking you use or which you look at, but get someone to just plot the scores of universities like I've done here. This happens to be the Times Higher Education World University Ranking. From 1 to, I think it ends up with 202. And what you see is some vertical distinction in this first 100 or so, and then the curve starts to flatten out. Literally, the difference in the first 25 is 0.64 in the score, and the last 25 was 0.08. And you see, when you look at their ranking, in fact, that they start to group lots of 50 universities in one ranking position, and then a bit further down the line it becomes 100. The other technique they use is to start segmenting all the universities. So I'm sure I can create a ranking for all universities that are in a country that starts with an L and ends with an A, and I'm sure you do all really well. I'm being facetious here. You can keep dividing it and finding ways. There is a commercial reason for this to happen. Quacquarelli-Simons goes around selling you stars. And if you do well in certain things that they might survey, you get more than 3 stars, but you can start with 3 stars, and it's something you can put on your website. Don't do it. My big problem with Times Higher Education is a reputation survey. I don't know how many academics you've asked, did you get the survey? What did you do? I was in Shanghai not so long ago talking to some colleagues from ANU. Australian National University is a well-ranked university. And one of the guys says, yeah, I got the survey. And when asked about the quality of teaching of universities in your discipline, what did you do? He says, well, I only know the teaching at ANU, so I filled in ANU. So he probably was a response that was struck out of that list because he said my own university is the best in teaching. He says, I don't know about teaching in other universities. With research, and I was a part of the group, the International Ranking Experts group that created the Berlin Principles. On the research side, forget the reputation bit, but if you look at bibliometrics, you start to get some repeatable data. We all know that good scholarship means that you can repeat the observations. And I have no confidence in reputation surveys. I'm sorry, but that's how it is. International outlook. Oh, you can work on that. Number of international students. Bring them on. And it moves me up. But why do you want international students? Get the motivation right, get the pedagogy right, and make it a worthwhile experience for everybody. And they'll love having international students. Groningen at the moment is working on the international classroom, and they're going at it hammer and tong, and they're realizing that the didactic method is not going to help the international classroom. And so they're changing their pedagogy to make sure that having Chinese, Thai, Indonesian, Lebanese, wherever they come from, students in the room, you need to see them as a resource and start using them in your teaching. And that's tough, because you've got to get all these academics to jump off the old wagon of just talking for 45 minutes and walking away. You have to be far more interactive. This is the problem that about 16 to 17,000 universities have around the world. They're not ranked. So what now? My current university is not ranked. We have 4 international branch campuses. We have some features that are second to none. 98%, 98.7% of our hotel management graduates are employed within 3 months. Guess what? That's the bit we hold up high. Come to us, you're going to get a job. They don't all become hotel managers. Our biggest sponsors of the graduate employment meetings that we do are the banks and the insurance companies, because they want people who understand hospitality and client service. Really strange, but that's how it is. So we're creating a signature. A PhD student who was with me from this country for 2.5 months started talking to students. I must admit, I grew a bit taller when she told me that our students can tell her what our strategic pillars are. Internationalisation, PBL, and research. We're not a research-intensive university, but we're trying to make a go at it. We're trying to get students into a curiosity mode by getting them involved in research. But for students to tell the strategic pillars of your university, anyone she asked, I think we're getting our message across. And so, yes, we're not ranked, but we have students from Germany who come from München, and they can go to a whole host of providers for the courses that we deliver, but they come all the way to us. Make the effort. So we're getting the traction I want, just on the basis of creating our own signature based on your strengths. And from what I read in, and I'm sure if I were to get brochures from other universities here in Lithuania, I will see lots of strengths. This one, whether you like it or not, collectively you are creating a national image. And I heard the warnings spoken right at the outset about tarnishing this national image. You can be fantastic in various areas of research. I've heard, for example, about your prowess in biomedical sciences. But all of that goes down the plug hole when the rest of the world thinks you can come to Lithuania on the basis of, well, there's anything you shove under their noses and they'll take you. Don't get into that trap. Maybe this is a heresy to go for a Baltic States alliance, but I think it is really worthwhile. Because together you are way more recognizable. Together you have complementary strengths, and you can start using the halo effect to actually improve the fortune. And I understand, particularly at senior management level, the feeling of competition in a country with a declining demography. As universities, you're all competing for the same cake of local students, but turn that switch off when you go abroad. Because the world is a very big place, and for the last 40 years, international students, degree-seeking students, has grown by 4 to 6% every year. And it will continue to do this. And so you can get and you can build your slice of the action on that. But you need to sort of manifest yourself. Whenever I write a policy paper, I go through the exercise of defining the stakeholders and answering this question. What's in it for me? The extent to which people are prepared to say, what's in it for my employer, depends on your relationship with your employees and how you've motivated them to want to go for the collective. That's the balance between me wanting to be promoted forever and my institution. There you are, in a very big area. I'm going to conclude with some stuff about English language taught programs. And the first thing, I'm using some older and some newer data from ACA, it doesn't matter. Only 1.3% of students across Europe are in ETPs. And the preponderance of ETPs, English taught programs in Europe, are master's degrees. Lithuania, by the way, has the highest proportion of institutions offering ETPs in the Baltic states. Why am I talking about this? Well, why would you want to do English taught programs? Certainly to abolish obstacles for foreign students, and there could be academic reasons for that, economic or altruistic reasons. You have a development project. By the way, Australia's prowess in recruiting international students is on the back of what we used to do in aid. The Colombo plan was to say to students from a range of Asian countries, come and study with us, we'll pay for everything. These people went back to their countries and ended up in prominent positions. And they started saying, well, if it was good enough for me, it's good enough for you. So why don't you go to Australia to get your education? And in 1989, the minister said universities are now allowed to charge fees to international students to recover their costs. And that's turned into Australia's third largest export after coal and iron ore. This one requires a lot of work, and the focus in internationalization and internationalization research is on how do you make it relevant for everybody. In Lithuania, the largest proportion of students taking English taught programs are Lithuanians. These are data from 2014. You have an interesting distribution of foreign students, and I understand there is a single institution that takes about 1,000 students from Belarus. So we need to, that's a particular situation. We have these in the Netherlands as well. Take it as read. But I'm going to show you something about ETPs, because Lithuania does as well as the Netherlands or Denmark. Let me take you through this table. First column, your population. How many international students did you host? OECD data. Correct, incorrect, we can have a big debate, but let's just use it for now. The ratio of hosted students, international students, to head of population is here. And you can see that, for example, the Netherlands hosts 3 times the number of international students per head of population as you do. Okay? And Denmark does even better, almost 4 times. Look at the percentage of English taught programs. I mean, international students are not going to invest in learning a 3rd language, apart from English, to come and study here and pay for the privilege. They want it in English. So I took the inverse of this percentage to adjust this ratio. And what do you see? What you see is that Denmark and the Netherlands and Lithuania are on the same score. What's the message out of this slide? It's very simple. You want more international students, get more English taught programs. But at the moment, with all your efforts, you're doing as well as the Netherlands, given the amount of opportunity you've created for international students. And you continue to do so. And if you want to improve that absolute number of international students, you will need to increase, as far as I can see, the number of English taught programs in this country. And I know how much pain that causes given your history. I understand that. I'm involved in the debate in the Netherlands. We have now a national commission on the use of English in education. But guess what? When Leiden University started in 1575, they spoke Latin. And did it screw up our Dutch national identity? No, it did not. And I don't think it will do this with any nation, because look at this country, out of 3 million people, 150,000 are in higher education. That leaves almost 3 million people who are not, to help carry your language and your national identity. It's a fear, and in this day and age, with populist politics, of course, it's a well-founded fear, but it's not going to happen. International standards must meet the same standard as your local students. Don't abrogate them for anything. Have a minimum language ability standard. I can't talk academically with someone with an IELTS score of 5.0. Yes, I can talk about the water is wet and the weather is cold, but I can't get into an academic dialogue. They need a certain level to be able to have a meaningful interaction. You will need a skilled admissions team. In my 20 years or so in executive functions in relation to internationalization, I've seen it all in terms of fraud. Absolutely amazing what you can come across, but we have an expert here to go and talk about that, so I'll leave that. Not before telling you that if you're aiming to offer someone a place to study, you have 72 hours. And why can I be so pedantic about saying that? Because your competition only takes that time. And an international student, let's take a Nigerian student, will apply to a UK university and a few others. And I know from experience that first in, best dressed. First in, 70% of the business goes to the first person to respond. Why is that so? Well, I think back about my time as a whippersnapper sitting in the Netherlands going to Australia. And I applied to several universities which I thought were at the limit of my ability, where they would let me in. I'd shot as high as I thought I could go. So the first one coming in, it's joy. I ran to my parents and showed them the letter of acceptance. Wow, I'm in. 2 or 3 weeks later, 4 weeks later, half a year later, my parents still received from others, yes, I could come. Okay, but I was already in Australia and I was already studying at the one that offered me first. And that's how it goes with most. I'm not going to mow any grass in front of the feet of my colleagues, but I'm just listing here for a moment modified or forged diplomas, from completely made up to altered. I've had some fantastic alterations. These days with modern technology you can reproduce things, but just change your marks. Someone else takes the exam. Notwithstanding all of the work that goes into preventing this, everybody in this room, my apologies, everybody in this room has a price, at which point you will deviate from your principles. Maybe 10 million euros, maybe 100 million euros, but there's somewhere where if you were in a real situation, you'll fall for it. Assignments on demand, already checked via Turnitin or any other system, written by someone else. I can tell you stories of students who tried to bribe one of our own students to write their theses, and when this student refused, and he could have taken home a nice amount of pocket money, something in the order of 50,000 euros, they said, oh, well, doesn't matter, we'll get it written in Bangladesh. I'm telling you how it is. What we've done in Australia and in the Netherlands, it's really interesting, is create a national code of ethics in the delivery of educational services to international students. And we give, in that code, the minister the power to stop an institution recruiting international students if they're seen to be not complying with the National Code of Ethics. Any self-respecting university will want to sign up to this because you don't want your country's name to be spoiled by some cowboys. And we've had some cowboys in Australia, and we brought them to justice, and we closed them down. And the other one is to have the sword of Damocles hang over the head of any student who's committed fraud to come to your university. You promise them, if at any time we discover before you get your degree or even after you get your degree that you've committed fraud, we will dismiss you, we will revoke your degree. Not that maybe does any good, but you can certainly make them scared that at any time we find out, you're out. You're not welcome in my country, in my university. Thank you for listening to me.
Thank you, Robert, very much. And I will take a microphone. Yes, while the audience thinks of the questions to ask, I will start by asking you about some very practical tips that you already gave about actually how to close this gap between where we are today in all our shabby situations, declining student populations, stringent budgets, lack of English language knowledge, very many negative aspects playing against us, and building the bridge into the bright future where we want to be, let's say on the level of the Netherlands, Australia, whatever country. Since we have leaders of institutions, what would be your practical advice, what they could start doing tomorrow, or maybe even today?
Yeah, I was reminded of what I heard yesterday. I listened to the kind people at PGTU, and they told me how a number of years ago they had 5 students, non-degree seeking students, moving in and 5 moving out, and today it's 500. That didn't happen overnight. So whatever you do immediately is a case of balance. If you are recruiting lots of students out of India, do you have partners in India with whom you do exciting research together to end up in the newspapers in India? Why am I saying this? You need to give back, and you need to give back generously what you're good at, because that is going to build your profile in the areas from where you are getting students. It goes a little bit like this. An Indian student who decides to go, let's just take master's level studies, is at the Indian university and says, I want to go and study abroad, will go to their academics and ask for advice. In India, more so than here, I think, just based on my knowledge on intercultural things, the reputation of that academic at that moment is incredibly on the line in his or her local environment. So they want to give good advice they are themselves convinced is good. If you, as an institution, are working together with this particular academics institution and are doing good things, his ability or her ability to recommend you is much easier to take. So if only you're doing is recruiting students, they wouldn't know whether you're good, bad or indifferent. But if you're recruiting students and you are working together with them in research on your strengths and your merits, they are more comfortable actually saying, yes, that's a good university to go. Clearly, students in this day and age with social media will send back information about their experience. So this is doing many things in many places incrementally and retaining a balance. And in doing so, a good friend of mine, Alan Gilbert, he created out of UMIST and Victoria University of Manchester, Manchester University. And he said to me, I invited him to speak at my first ranking conference. And he said to me, you know, I don't give a stuff about ranking. He's an Australian, so he can say that. I don't give a stuff about ranking. The ranking will follow me. What I'm on about is creating a university that has academic prowess, that has excellent academic standards, and the ranking will find us, not the other way around. And he stuck by that. He had an HR policy that rang like a bell and made everybody responsible to carry their bit of weight in the whole organization. And Manchester University, of course, in the rankings does exceedingly well. He didn't have bad material to begin with, but I think most universities here in Lithuania don't have bad material to begin with. It's about getting this message out, and in a balanced sort of way. Just recruiting as a quick fix to my demographic problem is going to run you into trouble. Recruiting and an academic approach back is going to create the balance with which you will help yourself. So there's no quick fix here. There is a broad approach with a strategy in which all these things are sort of brought together in one good policy, one good strategy, and getting the message out, or answering the question, what's in it for your individual academics? Now, I heard at VGTU, if you teach in an English to a program, you get twice the amount of money or something for teaching. That's a pretty damn good incentive for an individual, but maybe there is more. I, for one, would be really excited as an academic to know that I'm not just changing the lives of people in my immediate environment, but also those who live a lot further away. And there's some sterling examples of that.
Okay. You talk specifically about the viciousness of rankings. However, I'm very sad to say that in the official strategy for Lithuania, when the government decided how to measure quality of our institutions, one of the indicators chosen was to actually have at least one university in the rankings, and this was fixed in the strategy. Could you please come back to the issue of rankings and say specifically your words addressed not to academic audience, but to politicians and people at the level of government?
I'm glad you asked that question. It's a very good one. The second edition of the Shanghai Jiaotong ranking came out, and Jamal Salmi happened to be in Malaysia at the time. And the University of Malaya dropped 100 places in that ranking, and the politicians were calling for the dismissal of the Vice-Chancellor, who managed to, in 1 year, destroy the whole university. Now, you know, and I know, that from 1 year to the next, very little happens. I won't say nothing, because we're all trying to, continuous improvement, but not something to... So, Jamal Salmi had to explain to the politicians in Malaysia that ARU had changed its methodology. Now, I've run 3 ranking conferences at Leiden University, and each time, he must have been a masochist, I think, each time Martin Inns from the Times Higher Education came to my conference. And each time I got up and I said, Martin, you guys have changed the methodology again. I'm accusing you of doing it deliberately so that the ranking is an exciting event for everybody. Plus, I've been receiving calls from Quacquarelli Simons congratulating Leiden University on its improvement in the rankings. And by the way, did I want to take out a few extra pages with ads in a big book in which I could extol the virtues of Leiden University? It sounds all a bit commercial to me, and I think you're in the business of selling newspapers. Good on you. I mean, that's what you should be doing. But you want to sell the paper, and so you've got to keep it exciting. So change the methodology, because people will move up a few places, up and down. The third time, he got a bit annoyed with me, I have to say. He says, you say that every time. I said, yeah, but you change the methodology every time. And then, of course, they lost Quacquarelli Simons, and Thomson Reuters came in, And I think QS is back again with the Times Higher Education. And we keep changing things. And Yankai Liu, when he changes the methodology, makes a big play. Guys, I've changed the methodology. Please beware, you might move around a bit. Because they realize that changing the methodology is the quickest way to change the ranking. So my take on it's in your government strategy is that they've been ill-informed and ill-advised. And what needs to happen, the rectors collectively need to go back and discuss this with the government, because what it does, along with all due respect, all of the public accountability mechanisms that exist is take away from spending time on building the academic peaks that I know every university here is capable of. Yes, you can do some simple things to improve your ranking. I did it at Leiden University. We had some highly cited scientists who said, I'm from the Oortgebouw. That's Dutch for the Oort building. Anyone in astronomy knows this is the Valhalla of that particular aspect of astronomy, which is at Leiden University. So in papers, yeah, the Oortgebouw. Would Nyankai Liu's people know in actual fact that the Oortgebouw is Leiden University? Of course not. And how many ways are there to spell your university's names, leaving out diacritic here or there? And all of a sudden you're losing some ranking brownie points. So there's some simple things you can do, which I think you must do. And we're creating our own double-edged sword, because every university that's well ranked in something puts it on the website. And every university that's not says, oh, the methodology, you know, of course we can never get in here. So, academically, I'm saying ranking is, excuse my French, bullshit. I've been quoted in the papers as calling it a game, and it is a game. But we're stuck with it. But we need to go back to our politicians and say, hey guys, this is a great idea, but you should be... Where is your support for a national brand image? Where is the money we get to go to our Baltic neighbours and create a Baltic alliance for higher education to put us on the global map? This is climbing out of this situation. So my advice is go back to your politicians. This is not good. This is working against the best interests of your academic institutions.
Okay. Leaving some time for the audience to ask the questions, I would ask my last one and then continue. Change requires efforts. It requires resources, it requires time. Any motivational advice for our leaders? How can they help their institutions in this?
I think the first step sounds crazy, but I'm going to say it anyway. The first step is take a look at your policies, define the stakeholders of these policies, and answer the question, what's in it for me? And adjust your policies if there are large groups of stakeholders who are excluded in being able to get a sensible answer on what's in it for me. Because if there's something in it for you, you'll think that policy to be a good policy and you want to work for it. It sounds like the bleedingly obvious, and in many cases you will have done this already, sure, but have another look at it. Because your environment is continually changing, and are you still pleasing all your stakeholders? The employers have cried out, we want more contact with you guys. We want your students in amongst us. I'm a big advocate for co-locating universities and science parks, but not just science parks. If your university is good in biomedical science, then for Christ's sakes, have a biomedical science park and resist the economic efficiency of inviting also a few other players. Don't do it. Leiden stuck. The bioscience park in Leiden has been empty for a long time. Bit by bit it's grown. Now it's a powerhouse of biomedical companies, with some of the real big ones in the world having specifically chosen for that. Why is this good? you've got academics and graduates on your doorstep, and you can choose the best to come and work in your company. It creates a very strong nexus. Brainport in Eindhoven is another one of these examples. Literally, Eindhoven, Technical University Eindhoven, went to Manipal. They had a great master's program there, said, look, we want to do a joint master's. We want to bring your students to the Netherlands to do the second half of their master's. Oh, they haven't got the money. Doesn't matter. We will organize a loan system with a bank, and we will guarantee the loans. The students came from Manipal to Eindhoven, finished their masters, had a debt of 30,000, personal debt of 30,000, guaranteed by the university, underwritten by the bank. They lived for, like a student for another year whilst they were employed in the companies in Brainport. There's not been a single default. And so some of the best brains out of India are working in Brainport, Eindhoven. They're all small incremental steps. They're not huge steps. They're not Nobel Prize winning discoveries. They're incremental, and they're incremental because everybody is doing this, but you need to do it as well.
Thank you, Robert, very much. And I would like to open questions for the audience. Our colleagues have microphones, so please speak to the microphone so that translators can translate. Okay.
Hello, Asta Radzavičienė, VGTU. Robert, thank you so much for the presentation and for the ideas, and thank you for mentioning Colombo Plan, which I think is one of the greatest stories of internationalization, national strategy for internationalization, or regional strategy for internationalization. Do you see from your great experience traveling to different countries, continents, talking to very, very different players, that there are some other strategies, emerging strategies, which have potential to grow very quickly towards more, better internationalization of that region?
Yeah, Colombo Plan was not quick. It started in 1956. But the benefits that have flowed from it have been enormous, and sometimes in very surprising ways. I had a problem when I was at UQ with Singapore government validating our medical degree. It was really strange. So I then looked at University of Queensland. I googled University of Queensland, Singapore government. And I end up in a valedictory speech of one of their ministers who reminisced about his wonderful time at UQ. We didn't know he was an alumnus. So at our next graduation in Singapore, we invited him to be the speaker, and at the end of his speech, and during the drinks, I said, you know, we've got a slight problem with our medical degree recognition in Singapore. The next day, the process was set into motion to fix it. So Colombo Plan was not quick, but the results have been very long-term. Other mechanisms to ramp this up, like an aid to trade, I don't really know, other than there is one methodology in terms of recruiting students that I think is very controlled and very worthwhile. You control the quality of the students coming in, and that's where you do joint degrees. The downside of joint degrees is that if your partner cannot sustain their part of the bargain, you're left high and dry. And so joint degrees are always something where you have a plan B with your own resources to make sure that you can always let students finish a degree, even if it's no longer a joint degree. But joint degree is seen as a mechanism of student recruitment where you control the quality. You engage your partner, and there's lots of countries in the world where they'd love to collaborate with you and create stronger programs jointly, and by the by, learn from your expertise into their programs. But you can, so that's one mechanism I know other than the Colombo Plan. And so yes, yeah, you're doing a bit of development aid. You're helping a university in a situation, and there's two types of joint degrees. There's joint degrees with partners who are like this, and you're taking students who feel coming to you as a step up. And there are partnerships like this,
where you're offering specialties in a particular degree program that they haven't got. At Leiden University we had a fabulous joint program with the Karolinska Institute. You can see this is their tie. We had a fabulous program in medicine where we exchanged students because they offered stuff in neurology that we didn't have at the Leiden University Medical Center. And so there was an academic reason, and as partners we were at the same level. And so you should be playing both. But as a student recruitment strategy, I certainly think it's very well worth it. Quite apart from, if you have such a program in a particular region, I'll guarantee you will start to see free movers, people who want to get a degree at your university because their mate who's in this joint program is doing it as well. So your reputation sort of runs out before you. You actually get all this extra promotion without actually spending promotion euros. I hope that answered your question a little bit.
Yes. Other questions?
Hello, Neringa, Kaunas University of Technology International Office. Well, I had one question before you touched the joint degrees. And at the moment we are discussing the university that joint degrees, it is one side benefit, kind of, in terms of reputation. If we want our students to, if we want to recruit the students to start our degrees, and then one of the strategies of national recruitment could be joint degree with the university they cannot afford or they can't get in that easily, so that would make joint degree. And then we would send our students to them. On the other hand, we might be that university which attracts other students for the recruitment from maybe lower reputation universities from other countries. So how can we manage this double, I don't know, values, double side? And if we are talking about strategic partnerships in this term, we are proud to have double degree with Karolinska University, but then we are not that proud to have double or joint degree with, I don't know, a university from a country from somewhere in the third country that our students have no interest to have joint degree with them.
No, but you should distinguish two situations. Where you have this relationship, the university that's below you, shall we say, there is a one-way flow. You're not really offering your students to go and do things there. When it's at equal level, you're doing it for academic reasons. You want to offer your students an opportunity you can't give them. So it listens very carefully what your relationship is and what the flow of students is. So joint degrees are not necessarily always two-way. Give you another example. I'm involved with the University of Groningen to create a Center for Internationalisation of Education. And I'm in a faculty. Part of the faculty will create a university college. Now, they want to recruit students to their college, and it's a bachelor college. And I've said, for you to be really successful, to get excellent foreign students, you need to now go and talk to Cambridge and Oxford and MIT and Harvard and Yale and fancy places to see whether they'll take your students after they're graduated. Why? That then becomes a mechanism to recruit someone. Not that the University of Groningen is badly ranked, they're in the top 100 in any ranking you care to mention, but a stepping stone to what they hope to achieve. And so, depending on what the nature of your partner is, you need to be very clear that no, our students are not going to come to you. They, in turn, will see you as a step up. So that local university can say, we're working together with VGTU, and boy, you know, once you make it to that, you really got a ticket to ride. So they then recruit students. We do this, we've done this with University of Vietnam. And they told us they were able to recruit more students because it was a pathway to Leiden University. So, horses for courses. You got to be very careful how you define these things and not create expectations with your partners that you're not going to realize. Honesty in this game is very important, right from the outset.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Okay, let's use the opportunity to refresh ourselves with coffee, and we will be back sharply in half an hour. Thank you, Robert, very much once again.